Hi YouTube! Welcome to my channel. I know I haven't made a video in a really long time, but I thought that I would share a story time with you guys today. So here is story time! Why does my chin always do that? It always looks like a little bum. Like a greasy little bum. So today I'm going to be talking to you about the time I decided to travel internationally in a global pandemic. Super fun. Let's just get right into it. I was supposed to go to Ecuador and Peru on March 13th, and at the time we were in a pandemic, but they weren't advising, I'm Canadian by the way, they weren't advising Canadians not to travel. They were like, go on your trips, blah blah blah. So that's what I did. I went to Ecuador, and I got to Ecuador, and I had a few days before I had a tour planned. So the tour was taking me across the border, so it was taking me from Ecuador to Peru, and then in Peru I had another tour planned to get to Cusco from Lima and do Machu Picchu. Hike all the way up, do the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu. So that was the plan. I got to Ecuador. The airport, everyone was in like the full suits taking your temperature. I was like, oh my gosh, okay, whatever, they're taking their precautions. And then when I got to Ecuador the first night, it was fine. And then a few nights later I had a meeting with my tour guide, and he was saying that the Peru border had closed to European travelers. I'm not European, so I was like, okay, like that sucks for Europeans, but like I should still be able to get through. He said, you have tonight to decide if you want to go through with the trip, and if not, you get a credit. So at the time, there was no bars open, there was no restaurants really open in Ecuador. Everyone was inside, there was no museums. We did a tour that day, and we couldn't get into any museums or churches. So really, it was just like not worth it for us, so we decided to not go on the tour. And I was like, well, we just flew to Ecuador, we don't want to go home right away, you know, let's stay, let's do some fun things, let's stay in Ecuador for a little bit and then we can go home. So the night that he told us that we could decide to stay or not, there was a bunch of people who were like deciding to stay, deciding to go. A lot of them decided to cancel and go home. We canceled that and got a credit, but then we had to call everyone in between because we'd booked buses, we'd booked like private shuttles, we had like tours booked, all that, so we had to call every single person. And I don't speak any Spanish, like we don't speak any Spanish, and we had to try to call everyone and see like, can we cancel? And a lot of the places were like, well, like if you cancel you get charged, because we didn't cancel. It was an absolute friggin' disaster. So after probably like 3 hours, if not more, of non-stop like calling, emailing, texting, our tour guide was calling and like talking in Spanish, we finally managed to get a credit on most things. At this time our parents were like, yo, what the heck is happening? So they were like, we don't care, just come home, like the government has said all Canadians should come home. And I was like, whatever, we can stay, it's fine. Being the little child I am, I was like, it's fine, I'm invincible. They were like, just get home, just find the closest flight. And we were like, no, we're staying here. Fast forward a few hours, we couldn't find any flights. Flights were going for over $5,000. There were so many people who couldn't find flights. So many of our friends like could not find any flights. A lot of them were from Europe. So finally at 3 a.m. that night we found one flight to Panama. We were going to stay in Panama for a bit, and then we were going to try to find a flight back to Toronto. So we booked that, and we were like, we're fine. A few of our friends went on like another just 3-day tour to kill time. They wanted us to go on it, and we were like, no, we don't want to. Which is good we did, because our flight that we had booked ended up getting canceled. We booked a flight a day earlier because we spent that day in Ecuador and there was no restaurants open. There was no bars, there was no one on the streets. It was like absolutely dead. It was kind of scary. Like we were like, where are we gonna eat? Like there's nowhere to eat. Everyone's freaking out. Everyone in our hostel was like on the phone talking to people trying to get flights. Like it was crazy. Like the workers at the hostel were like, I'm sorry, like we don't know what we can do. But they were just like, everyone's like trying to get home so badly. And there's people from Australia, Europe, North America, everywhere. After that, we were like, we don't want, like, it's a little risky to stay here another night, so we booked a flight for that night to Panama, because more flights were showing up, because they were in such high demand. So we booked a flight to Panama, and we had a super nice beach resort booked in Panama that we were gonna stay in, because I just wanted to go to the beach. Like, that was all I wanted. I was like, I came all this way, I want to go to the beach. So we booked this really nice resort on the beach. Our flight was at like 4 a.m. We went to the airport that day to see if there's any other flights. My parents were like, go to the airport right now. And that's when they said that the flight that we were supposed to get was canceled, like for that night, and we were like, no, it can't be canceled. They said it was canceled, and then some people said it wasn't canceled. So we just showed up there at like midnight, and we were like, there is a flight, right? And they were like, yeah, it's fine, but Panama won't let you in. Panama shut their borders to all international travelers, so we couldn't get into Panama. We couldn't go to our beach resort that we'd booked for 3 nights, which was very expensive. So I was very angry about that. We couldn't get into Panama. We couldn't leave the airport. And at that time, we had a 3-day layover in Panama. And we were like, we are not staying in the airport for 3 days. But before we got on the flight, they wouldn't let us get on the flight without showing that we had booked a flight out of Panama, because Panama wasn't taking anyone in. We had to show that we were leaving. So we got out of the line, the long ass lineup. We got out of it, booked a flight to Miami, from Panama to Miami. We're not from Miami. Went back in line, showed her our flight to Miami, and she said, but you're Canadian. And we were like, okay, but we're just gonna go to Miami, okay? And she's like, no, you have to show me a flight to Canada. And we were like deep breaths, okay, what's another freaking grand, like. So we went back out of line and we booked a flight from Miami to Toronto that night. And then after we'd booked that flight, we went back in line and she was like, oh, but you're Canadian, so technically you could stay in Miami. And I was like, lady, you just told us that we had to get a flight out of Miami when we told you that we were allowed to stay in Miami, and now you're reassuring us that we were allowed to stay in Miami after we already booked a flight out of Miami. Yeah, so that happened. But we had our flight booked to Toronto. We had like a 7-hour layover in Miami because we thought Miami was going to be busy. It really wasn't at all. But we got on our flight to Panama. Turns out that flight was the last flight leaving Ecuador for the next 3 weeks. We got on that flight out of Panama, the last flight out of Ecuador. We got to Panama, waited. There was like hella security. At that time, the Panama border was closed. The American airports were absolutely crazy. We were seeing it all over like Snapchat and stuff. The airports were absolutely nuts. So we were really nervous to go to Miami. They were talking about closing the Canadian-US border. And we were like, oh my god, as long as we make it, like we just need to make it to Toronto. That's all. Like, please just don't close the border on us before our flight. Because that already happened to us in Panama. Rewind. I called about canceling our resort in Panama and no one answered me. So I paid for 3 nights at a 5-star resort that I didn't get to stay in. Woohoo! So happy about that. But we got to Panama, got to Miami. Miami airport was dead. 7-hour layover in a dead airport. Dead. There was no one there. It was just cops everywhere. Like, after our long layover in Miami, we were like those girls that were like sleeping on the floor of the airport and like didn't have any money to like get food or anything because we'd spent so much on flights trying to get out of Ecuador. and hotels and hostels that we weren't planning on staying in, that some of them didn't get to stay in. We got to Miami, we got on our flight to Toronto. There's crazy lines in Toronto. We finally got into Toronto, and that night that we got into Toronto, they closed the US-Canadian border. So this whole trip getting home, we literally squeezed by like an inch. Like, we got into every country like by an inch. Last flight out of Ecuador, like one of the last flights out of Panama, like only a few hours before they closed the border. It was actually crazy. And then leaving Toronto, we had our masks on, super cute. New look, it's called
coronavirus.
It's called the Corocola.
No. It's called bullshit.
I tried to vlog the trip, but once it took that downward spiral, my vlogging got a little off track. When she came over, what?
What?
I said I started recording right when she came over. It was awkward. Well, I'll see if I have any videos to show you guys, but that was the story. We got to Toronto, got a hotel for the night, and drove home. It was crazy, so much money trying to get home. And the moral of this story is, if there's a global pandemic, don't travel in it. Don't do the same mistake I did. Don't travel in a global pandemic. Even if when you say, but everyone's like, we told you so, you shouldn't have traveled. But if I didn't have traveled, I would have lost all the money that I'd spent. And because I traveled in a global pandemic, and then Canada gave like whatever, they told us all to come home, everything was covered, I think, I hope, pray for me. Insurance will cover most of it. So if I didn't go, I would have just wasted money. But because I went, and because I got into an absolute disaster of a situation, I'll get some money back, so yay, joke's on you. I'm kidding. But yeah, don't travel in a global pandemic. Learn from my mistakes. It was a memory I'll never forget. It was crazy. The idea of like not knowing if you'll be able to eat, and like knowing that you can't go outside is crazy. And like you're in a foreign country, you don't speak the language, there's no food around you. It's chill. It's completely chill. But I feel so bad because I do have friends that are stuck in Ecuador, in hostels, in hotels. They have to try to get food delivered to them. The hostels that they're at are trying to get groceries so they can make food for them. I know people who are stuck on top of Machu Picchu. That could have been me, stuck on Machu Picchu. They literally fear for their life. So you guys, this is a serious thing. It can affect so many people, and so many people are affected by it. So please stay inside, stay safe. Think of your elders, think about people with immunocompromise. Like, I know that personally young people might not take it seriously, and they might not think that they'll get it, but think about the people you love, and think about the people abroad, because it's a really scary experience to be stuck abroad in a global pandemic, and I can't imagine what they're going through. I know getting home was absolute craziness and really stressful while we were there, so I can't imagine what they're going through right now. So just send your love to them, and don't travel in a global pandemic. That's all I have to say, but let me know if you guys ever traveled, if you guys were stuck abroad with this whole coronavirus thing, because it was kind of funny, to be honest. Looking back, it'll be funny. It will. Once I get my money back, it'll be funny. Once I get my money back, though. Once I get all my money back, and I didn't get coronavirus, then we can laugh about it. But for now, it's touchy stuff. It's a touchy subject. And my bank account's really hurting, and my family was really stressed. So yeah, that's all. That was my journey of trying to get home through many canceled flights, countries not allowing me in, much money spent, airlines being a disaster, canceling flights left, right, and center, telling you can't get on, not speaking your language, telling you have to book more flights, and then telling you didn't need to book that flight. Everyone wearing masks. I was Lysoling the whole plane. It's fine. It was a whole experience. Again, it'll be funny once I get my money back, but for now, not funny.